Is your child having a hard time finding a good friend at school? Even worse, is your child being bullied at school?
Or is your child having a difficult time setting boundaries with their friends?
Today we spoke with award-winning author, mental therapist, Christina Furnival. The author of The Not So Friendly Friend joined us today for a wonderful conversation that's going to help each and every one of us parents. Enjoy. All right. Christina, thank you for joining us on this lovely afternoon. You are coming live to us from San Diego. Is that correct? You're not too far away.
No, hello.
Well, I obviously want to talk about your book, The Not So Friendly Friend. But before we do that, I have a question, and I normally don't start talks with this kind of a question, but I'm going to start it this way. You ready?
Okay. I think
What
so.
advice would you give to parents? What are we missing out in terms of the raising of our young kids? What are we missing? What's the one thing that like you see in a relationship between a parent and a child? What's the one thing that's like, oh, if I could just butt in and help you here, that's what I would tell you to do.
I think parents, in and amongst themselves, as well as in their relationships with their children, could use a lot more compassion. Compassion for themselves and compassion for their children. We are all learning as we go. The kids are learning how to live. We're learning how to be parents every single day. It's a new situation. And I think we're all too hard on ourselves, and we could use a little more compassion.
Why do you think that's the case? Why are we so hard on ourselves, in your opinion?
I think there's a lot at play there. There's societal norms and expectations, but I do think social media plays a really big part in that. It's been so prevalent for like 15 plus years now in everyone's daily life. And I think we constantly are comparing ourselves to others.
Agree with that wholeheartedly.
Wholeheartedly. So that's great advice especially for parents, for everyone. Okay, now I'm gonna switch it up a bit and ask you, what is that one conversation we should be having to help our kids in life?
I think we need to build our kids up. There's this idea that we don't want to brag or that we don't want to seem arrogant. But the reality is most of us go through life with a really negative inner voice. And some of that is just our own internal process, but some of it is learned that, oh, we shouldn't share about our successes because we don't want to make other people feel bad or because we don't want to emphasize an imbalance. But I think as parents, we need to lift ourselves up and I think model that for our children, but then also have those conversations with our kids where we bolster that self-esteem and we help them realize that at their core, they are wonderful and perfect just as they are. And if you have that and you go through life with that, then you feel more robust to handle anything that comes your way. So I think that conversation needs to be had a lot more.
I love that because we were both raised to be humble, to be very humble.
Like too humble?
I think
like
too humble,
right? Yeah.
So it's like we're very careful with our kids too. We also, anytime my daughter, sounds like she's bragging, I'm like, oh, whoa. Hey, like could you have said that a different way or be careful about bragging? But I love this advice.
But it's
That's
also
great.
hard for parents. I'm going to play the devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
I can say that?
Yeah.
I'm going to play the hard side because there's going to be some parents and some viewpoints that are going to say, but we want to be real with our kids. We don't want, if they didn't do a good job, we don't want to tell them they did a good job. So how would you suggest us handle that if our kid makes a mistake or actually has a bad performance? And
right. Totally.
So what would you suggest on handling that?
So I think there's a nuance there. I want for parents to build up their kids' sense of self, that they know that they can handle whatever comes their way, including successes and including what we call failures, right?
Yeah.
So the outcomes are not reflective of who our child is and what they're capable of. And so I think if we can build up their sense of self, their belief in themselves, their knowledge that they can grow and change and adapt and evolve and learn from their mistakes, then it's not about giving everyone a trophy because they played in a game, or it's not about kind of, oh, you made a mistake, so you're a failure. It's like you at your core are wonderful. And then these are kind of the auxiliary things that don't speak to who you are. So I feel like if that core is solid and happy, your child can handle it, whatever comes their way.
Yes. Okay.
That's great.
So let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about boundaries and teaching kids how to be strong within themselves when they're away from us, when they're at school. Oftentimes, you know, a lot of our kids just went back to school, especially after the pandemic when they were maybe at home in school. So
Right.
their social skills may not be as robust as they need them to be able to handle themselves.
Yeah.
What advice should we give our kids in terms of handling their peers?
You're absolutely right. They've had about a year and a half of frozen social skills that are starting to thaw out. They're getting back into the practice of being around other kids and dealing with the ways other people interact with them. You know, we're used to our family life and our insular family life, and maybe there are functional systems, maybe there are dysfunctional systems, but then we take our learnings from that and we put them into our social settings, and it doesn't always work. And just like I said earlier, we're all learning as we go. Our children and their peers are learning as they go. So when it comes to just social interactions in general, there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be misunderstandings, and there's going to be times where someone doesn't treat our child the way that they would want to be treated. And so if we're able, through the years of open conversations and encouragement, to build up our child's sense of self, then they are more likely to be able to not be as personally affected by whatever negative interactions are happening with their friends. And if they're experiencing bullying, that's great to have conversations about that at home preventatively, as well as in reaction to bullying, so that your child knows what a good friendship is, what a good friendship isn't, and what bullying is, and then what you could do about it. So having those conversations kind of anytime it comes up in television shows, there's often a theme of relationships. When you're reading books with your kids, if they're willing to open up and talk with you about their friendships, any sort of advice or guidance that you can give in those moments about, wow, it sounds like Kelly was being kind of mean to Susie. Why do you think she was doing that? What could Susie have done? You know, even if it's indirect and not directly related to your child, sometimes they can see situations even more clearly through that lens.
Yeah, I think a lot of children are also scared to kind of get involved or stick up for other kids. Do you have any advice on how us as parents can maybe talk to them about that?
Yeah, so the idea of a bystander turning into an upstander has been a really big push recently. And what's wonderful about that, if someone is able to speak up to, let's say, a child who's bullying in defense of a child who's being bullied, that can show the child who's being bullied that they have people that care about them. There's actually, though, some research has shown that there's like a negative side to it as well, though, that if other people are speaking up for the child who's being bullied, that indirectly tells the child that's being bullied that they can't handle it. So there's this weird balance of, you want your children to support their friends, but maybe the best way to do that is to speak to an adult and let them know what's happening, so that an adult can help mediate the entire situation and empower the child who's being bullied to make choices that might protect them. So yeah, it's kind of a sticky one there, but I think talking with your children about what bullying is, that the adults are there to help. Most schools now have some sort of bullying prevention program and protocols, and they're way better than they used to be, because the research, used to say suspension, expulsion, get them out of there.
Yes.
They don't belong. And that doesn't help anyone.
Right.
The bully doesn't learn kind of what is going on for them and why they need to make changes. They don't develop empathy if they're just kicked out of school. And at the same time, the person who's being bullied doesn't get the chance to learn how to stand up for themselves or solve their problems with someone that maybe they don't get along with very well.
That makes so
That
much
is
sense.
very,
Yeah.
very good advice and good information. So thank you for that. What do you, if I don't want to say we have a kid that gets bullied, because I don't, I mean, maybe there's more than what we know. Let me say it that way. Let me ask it that way. If us as parents suspect that our kid is getting bullied, but our kid is quiet and they're not going to really divulge that information, is there a way you would recommend us parents look into it? Because I am one of those who understands that a child who's getting bullied quietly or getting bullied constantly it's not healthy for the child at all, and it
That's right.
needs to end. It's not good for their self-esteem, it's not good for their confidence, self-worth, all of that stuff. But some of the kids who get bullied, they keep it within themselves and they internalize it.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you recommend, how we as parents who may suspect our kids are getting bullied, how can we approach our kids to find out what's going on, And do you ever recommend us going around our kids to seeing if our kids are being bullied?
So if you have a child who you think is being bullied, or you have a reason to believe that they are being bullied, your parenting gut is good, right? So listen to it. Talking to your child is the first step. If they're not open and willing, then I do believe as your parent, your job is to protect and support them and to show them that you will do that. If that means speaking to the school or speaking to the parents of what the other child, let's say, I think that's an okay thing to do. But like, I'm trying to think, I've got a couple different thoughts coming at me right now, but when your child is going through a crisis or a trauma situation, you have to be the one to direct what happens, because their brain is going to be in a state where they can't problem solve. And as the parent, they need to know that you as the parent are going to take charge of the situation and protect them. That may mean you kind of breach their confidentiality, or that you overstep what they would want you to do. But when they're out of it and in hindsight, they'll say, wow, you know what? I didn't want my mom or my dad to do something, but they did, and it's better now. And my parents know how to protect me, and I'm really glad that they did. So sometimes you do have to step around and speaking to them first. If that's not working, figuring out what other way that you can do it and support them. And that's really important.
I love that advice and information, because I'm one of those parents who is strong on the phrase, we'll let them figure out, let them handle themselves. It's
kind of old school. We were taught even more like, you handle it.
Figure it out.
I didn't mean it like that, honey. But
like, you're not going to allow someone to do that to you.
Well, my point was, I'm one of those parents who likes to let my kids handle and learn and grow and deal with their situations. Saying that, however, I think when it comes to bullying, I think parents need to step in, because bullying's like a silent assassin on our kids. And it's one of those that whether we like it or not, the value that their peers give them and the place their peers give them in life, they can internalize, and it gives them a lot of
especially as teenagers.
So I am definitely and I'm happy you shared it the way you did. But for anyone who knows me, I like, and I'm probably on a personal level, I like to let our kids fall and struggle and forget things and fail and pick themselves up. But when it comes to bullying, we have all of us parents have to be very mindful of that and make sure our kids are not on either end of it, on whether they're being bullied or bullying. Neither of it's healthy for our kids. And that's one area, like you said, Christina, I think we have to kind of overstep and be aggressive on.
I think so too. And I'm so glad that is your viewpoint. Bullying can have really long-term serious effects. And we've all heard the stories on the news of children harming themselves or of children harming others as a result of having been bullied. And we know that parental support is a huge buffer against those long-term issues and mental health disorders down the line of depression or anxiety, that if a parent can be there for their child and show love and wrap themselves around them and let them know that they'll be okay and they'll be safe and this will end, that helps our child to bounce back and be resilient against all of the experiences that they can encounter. A teacher support is also a really big buffer. And then even a single friend is a good buffer against any of these long-term effects.
It's great.
Yeah. I think it's changed. So like our first three, they're older. And I think that the values in the schools have changed as well, because they have so many programs and talk to kids constantly about bullying and kindness and how to be a good peer in their school. So I love what they've done.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good that this is being spoken about, because that's a big thing too. And going back to what we were saying before about having conversations with our kids, is if they know what to look for or what to identify in healthy friendships, not healthy friendships, or legitimate bullying, then they're going to be able to raise the flag and be like, that's not okay. And I know what to do about it.
So, and this parlays perfectly into the next topic I want to talk about, is helping our kids find good friends. And you wrote a book on this, an award-winning children's book called The Not So Friendly Friend. And we will have a link in the description box for anyone who's watching or listening on the podcast. You can order the book through the link. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, what made you tackle, first of all, it's a great idea because there's
Mm.
no books that are really, in my opinion, talking about it. And that is such a crucial thing for our kids to learn is how to, pick the right people, that how to be a friend and who should be their friend.
Mhm.
Such an important topic. They're spending hours and hours and hours every day with their peers and with this specific person. So I guess my question is, what made you decide to write this book, and yeah, how did you come about it?
So I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and I've been in the field for over a decade now. And before having my own kids, I worked exclusively with youth and adolescents. And topics that came up time and time again were about friendships and relationships. And then now that I've got my own kids, they're in preschool and elementary school. And my daughter came home from school one day pre-pandemic and was having an issue with a friend of hers. And I would see this at drop off. I would see that either this child would be super affectionate and loving towards my daughter or very cold. And my daughter would kind of look at me like, what is happening? And I have a bunch of children's social emotional books with having been in the mental health field and working with children. And so I went to my friendship selection and I went through them, and I just couldn't find a book that spoke about this topic of knowing how you should be treated, knowing when you're not being treated right, and that you can do something about it by setting a boundary. And so I sat down and I wrote it in my phone. I just, like, this rhyming story just came out of me, and my kids loved it. And I knew it would be impactful and important for them. But then the pandemic happened and I kind of forgot about it. And I came back across it in my phone in September of 2020. And it hit me that it really was good and that it
Yeah.
needed to be out there for other children and not just my own. So I began the process of finding publisher and getting the book made, and it has blown my mind how important this book is. It exceeded what I expected. The feedback that I've been getting is incredible, and even from adults who are reading it and they're saying, you know what, this is great for my child because I need to help them with this issue with their friend, but this is speaking to my inner child, or this is something that I wish I had learned when I was young, and learn how to set a boundary before I was 30. And so it's been a really it's taken on a life of its own, which has been really, really cool.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And I love that. I
Thank
love that.
you.
What ages, for anyone what ages are you trying to reach with the book?
It is geared for elementary age kiddos, so 4 to 10-year-olds, more or less. But I wrote it for my daughter when she was 3, and my current 3-year-old son loves it. And then older kids as well. It is a rhyming picture book. So for, let's say, middle schoolers or high schoolers, it's going to feel very young, but there will be a piece of it because it's super simple that will hit home with them. And at the back, there are questions and discussion starters for caregivers or teachers or therapists to read and go through with their kiddos. And those are really poignant no matter how old you are.
Great.
Oh,
Can you
that's
give us an
great.
example of one of those questions?
Yes. Well, I've got it right here.
Yeah.
So let's see. There we go. So at the back, it has a note to parents and professionals, and then conversation starters and discussion questions. And so simply enough, it's what is a boundary? So let me ask, what is a boundary? Do you guys know?
Franny, she's asking you.
I was taught to put a wall up.
So that's
Stay away from them.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So boundaries are like a wall, and I like to think of it like a fence around a yard. And let's say you love to garden and you have this beautiful garden and you're constantly tending to it, but you don't have a fence. And so the neighborhood Fido comes every day and does their thing on your yard and then leaves, and you're left cleaning up their mess, and you're left annoyed that you're having to deal with this, but you don't have a boundary on your yard to tell that dog that they're not welcome. And so you hire someone, you have a fence installed, and then all of a sudden you get to enjoy what is yours and protect what is yours by this boundary. And so with people, it's not so visible, but it's the same idea. We have to be explicit and we have to say out loud, this is what I do or do not like in how you're treating me or someone else. And there's a power in that, and there's an authenticity in that. If you can enter a relationship being your true self, then the person that you're a partner with, they know what you like, what you don't, what you value, what matters to you, and they can interact with you within that framework. And then likewise, if they give you boundaries as well, then your relationship has this clarity from which you can be free to be your authentic selves and to have a mutually beneficial and enjoyable relationship. So boundaries are so, so, so important. I think they're a superpower for our kiddos. This also asks, when might we want to set a boundary? Is it easy or hard? What is a good friend? What do they say or do? And then if I set a boundary, am I being mean? Because there's that belief of either, like you just said, we set these firm walls, which unfortunately means no good comes in, but no bad comes in, but maybe no good comes in because we're so closed. And then some people have boundaries that are so porous that they absorb everyone else's stuff, or they take on the weight of everyone else's things. And we want to have a white picket fence with a little gate. So it's clear, but it's nice. And it has the flexibility for you to change your mind or to decide who, when, what.
That's great.
I really wish our schools had classes on this stuff and talked about it more.
I think it's so much more important now, especially with social media.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You can feel inadequate in so many areas. Even as a parent, imagine it's so hard for us. Imagine how difficult it is for them.
Yeah, right. We have the maturity. Our prefrontal cortex is developed around the age of 25. So we have the maturity and wherewithal to make sense of things and to even know logically, oh, that has nothing to do with me. That's coming from them, but it still can affect us. And for our kids, they don't have all of that. And it definitely, it's even that much more impactful. Social media is definitely has its good sides and its bad sides.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Christina, where can everyone get their book? They don't click the link below. Where can they get the book?
You can also find it on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble online, on Target online. And if you would like a signed copy with a personalized note, you can go to ChristinaFurnival.com/books and place an order there.
Love it.
Awesome.
Okay, before we let you go, I want one more scenario. I like asking you scenarios, if that's okay. You ready?
Yes.
So we pick our first grader up from school, okay? And he's crying, saying the kids have been mean to him, okay? He had a bad day. What do we as parents do? Because some parents will react, turn the car around, say, which kids did this? Some parents will quickly call the teacher.
The old me.
Some parents will turn the car around and storm into the principal's office and say, you need to fix this. What's the best way us parents can handle that kind of a situation?
The best thing you can do initially are two things: empathize and validate. Your child is telling you, and they want to feel heard. They want to feel supported. And if you do those two things, tell me more about it. What happened? What led up to that? What was your thought when they said that? How did you feel? Oh my gosh, I would have felt the same way. And having that sort of conversation where you're expressing curiosity and you're interested and you're there for them and you express that you get them, that is going to help diffuse their feelings so, so, so much. And from there, you could keep a log if you wanted. If this is a recurring situation, write down the date, write down the incident, write down what happened, and keep track. Because then if you do decide to go to the school, it helps to have data points versus, oh, he's just mean all the time to my kid. It helps to be like, on this date, they did this. On this date, they did this. And, we've been keeping track. And I've been helping my child by telling them to use a boundary, to tell their teacher. And, and that way you've got this log. But on the first time, just empathize and validate. Those are two of the best things that you can do.
Okay.
Great advice.
I have to follow it up with one more. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We picked the kids up. You could obviously see they've had a bad day and you want to approach them. You may ask them some questions and they simply say, I don't want to talk about it. And they shut down.
Teenager.
Well, some kids too. Or just say, nothing, Mom, everything's okay. Or just don't give you any information. What would you suggest at that point? And you can clearly see it's really eating them up.
There's something really going on.
What would you suggest?
It is very specific to your child, and you're going to know them best as far as how in the past you've been able to get them to open up when they're not ready. With some kids, like my kids are young enough that I can read them a book about a child that didn't share something bad and how it stewed inside them. There's a book called actually it's, I think in the room, but I Had a Bad Day, and there's like The Terrible Day, and it's got a big cloud. And there's stories for younger kids about holding in our thoughts or holding in our feelings and how it festers and how it doesn't make things better. And we actually need to talk about them to make them better. So if your kids are young, you can start doing some of that stuff early on to help them learn and get practiced in sharing, even though they maybe don't want to. If your kids are a little older, giving them space, letting them know, hey, you know what, you're saying it doesn't bother you, and I will take your word for it, but know that I'm here. And when you're ready to speak about anything, you can come to me, you know, and I'll listen. If you want it to stay between us, it can stay between us, except in the case, like we talked about before, if you need to overstep, for safety and mental health reasons. But yeah, just so much depends on your child. And if you have that culture created, that atmosphere of I'm here for you when you need me, then a lot of times they'll kind of come back later once their own emotions have gone down a little bit.
Love that. Love that. Franny, anything else?
I don't think so.
You
I
sure?
love this. I'm going to be reading this myself.
Oh,
sure.
good.
To my 6-year-old.
Wonderful.
Christina, before, I know we just said this, but before we finally let you go, we like to give our guests up to a minute to talk about whatever you want to talk about, to share an important, anything you want to with our community. It could be anything. It really can. I just want them to
a golden nugget you may have.
Hear what Christina may want to offer our community.
Ooh, there's so many things. I've got a million thoughts, but one of the thoughts that's coming to mind at the forefront is it's a quote that I love, and it's, you don't have to believe everything that you think. And I love it because our thoughts come to us and we feel like they're truth. And that can impact how we feel, especially if our thoughts aren't very helpful. And so I work with my clients and myself and my husband and my kiddos on, you know, is that thought true? What's another way to think about the thought that still is true, but maybe is more helpful to your situation or to your mood or to how you're doing right now? So parents, when you're down on yourself because you made one bad choice with your kids and you're feeling like you're the worst mom or dad in the world, that thought is not true. You don't have to believe everything you think. And the more we can become detectives in our own lives and in our own experience, the more that we can create the life that we want for ourselves and the lives that we want for our kids.
Wow.
So great.
That's profound. Love that.
Thank you so
That's
much,
great.
Christina.
Thank
take
you,
care,
guys.
okay?
You too.
Thank you, Christina.
Bye.
So good to meet you.
Christina Furnival, everyone, the author of The Not So Friendly Friend. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Christina.
Great advice.
Franny, what did you learn from our talk with Christina?
I think I learned to be more compassionate and just listen to the children as they're telling you the story. I think she was right. Our kids just want to be heard.
Yeah, and what I learned was the importance of questions after. How questions can open up a huge conversation to go somewhere where you never expected it to go. So us parents who may be a little afraid to have those kind of important conversations, lead with questions. And it doesn't have to be regarding your child's specific situation. It could be someone else's situation. It could be through a book. I love that advice Christina gave us. So anyways, you guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, make sure you hit that bell, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, Francis and TJ are signing out. Much love. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, guys.